Whew. LinkedIn says I only have 7 seconds. I've wasted three. Let's get to work. Before I get started, I want to take the time to send an incredible, heartfelt thank you to the team at Peach Score. Really looking forward to being in the accelerator. This has been almost a 12-year journey to the point where I have enough confidence to stand up and say that I can solve a $2.2 trillion problem, or at least make a significant enough dent in it that the market will reward our vision, our execution, and our boldness. I want to start with the foundation for which I had this idea by taking you all back to 2013. In 2013, I was a sales executive for an advanced technologies consulting company, Wiseman Consulting, out of Houston, Texas. One of our primary industries we focused on was energy. The secondary focus was utilities. The tertiary focus was oil and gas. And I had been taking the time to research some of the partnerships that we had in place. IBM was one of those partners. And I met with the IBM team, and they were releasing an incredible technology known as Watson. They basically explained it to me as it was going to revolutionize the world. This was 2013. And they asked if I had seen the Jeopardy episode. And I was like, no. And so I took a look on YouTube. And what I kind of found out is that IBM Watson had smoked humans. I mean, just absolutely destroyed us. For those who don't know Jeopardy, Jeopardy is a general knowledge competition. You basically have to be a human encyclopedia to reach the levels of Ken Jennings, who is now the host, and Brad Rutter, who was the second winningest Jeopardy participant of all time. And in a three-way competition between the number one earner, the number two earner, and IBM Watson, Watson's final score was in 77,000 to the humans who were at the 21,000 each. So at that point, what was funny is that Ken Jennings, the now host of the show, wrote in his final answer, "I, for one, welcome our machine overlords." So after being educated on Watson, I'm in an engagement with Saudi Aramco Oil and Gas. And their team, we were meeting with a team of reservoir engineers, and we were looking for ways that we could extend well life and reduce well maintenance costs, because you're out in 120 to 140 degrees Saudi Arabian desert, incredibly hot, incredibly volatile conditions. And so the company was looking and seeking for ways to use technology. At that point, we were proposing a big data solution paired on the four key indicators off of the well. It's gas oil ratio, wellhead pressure, water cut, and bottom hole pressure. These are the strongest indicators of the health of the well. And in a flash, while we were sitting talking about big data, I saw a complete solution. So I raised my hand and I said, hey, couldn't we take the big data set that we're creating, advanced analytics, predictive, prescriptive, and descriptive from Splunk, the machine data, and IBM Watson, combine them together and create a virtual oil well consulting company? Pair it with the humans so that in real time and predictively, they know when to go out and make maintenance to the well. Engineers loved that idea. They absolutely loved it. I looked over on my side of the table and they weren't so thrilled. At that point, I had just taken us out of the driver's seat because only IBM had Watson capabilities. But that wasn't my concern, because I saw something much greater than just what we were discussing in that room. I saw what would it become. If you combine all of those capabilities orchestrated by IBM Watson, you had the opportunity to create multiple solutions for the engineering group. You're talking about a well health monitoring system. You could get upstream, midstream, and downstream, basically the transmission of the oil from where it's sourced out of in through to the refinement facilities. You could get insights off of how to make that better. You could package that up as intellectual property and sell it. You could train IBM Watson to become a supply chain expert. So Saudi Aramco could package that up and sell it, the insights and the data. Logistics recommendations, package that up and sell it. Transport recommendations, right? So some roads are typically a little bit more bumpy than others. So if you're talking about metal pieces being bumped and gyrated based on the roads, maybe there's more optimal routes so that the metal isn't already being eroded from a health standpoint based on the friction and vibration. And then also just maintenance, descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive. it was at that point I could see what the future was. This is 2013. And the concept came off of a project that I had done in my final project for programming with algorithms and logic. And it was based on a concept I was calling at the time autonomous operations. I looked at Pareto's principle. 80% of the work that you do generates 20% of the results, meaning 80% of the work is very wasteful. And I wanted to see if machines could, at that time, this is 2010, if machines could be intelligent enough to automate that 80%, because 20% of your work generates 80% of your results. So the more time that you can spend on creating that 20%, that magical, or focusing on that, the more 80%, the growing pool. And so at that point, I wanted to go out into the market and learn how to build, because I was a salesperson at the time. It wasn't a very good experience when we got back to the office. I basically was told that I was just a salesperson and I should stick to sales, not solutions. And so what that did is it motivated me. It motivated me to move into a position where I had full command over humans who would be building solutions that I thought would make a major impact in the market. And lo and behold, I got into product management and product leadership, product strategy. And by 2017 in my career, I had moved to the point where I was the resource that leadership depended upon to build the product operations of our company. We had been a company for a very long time. Really See Technologies that then got acquired by Black Knight Financial Services. At the time, the company had been in business for 15 years. But when you get into business and you start doing business, ultimately you just start transacting business. And that creates a lot of problems and a lot of opportunities, especially for those of us who are solutions or operations minded. Because at some point, if you get acquired, the parent company is going to want you to follow a certain set of standards and procedures and run your operations in a way that can bubble up into a global view, if you're a large corporation internationally, or a national view of the operations of the company. And so these are some of the notes from a meeting I had where the VP of product asked me if I would not just focus on product management and product strategy, but ultimately now lead the transformation in the product operations. So implementing standards, process improvement, reporting and analytics, how we build business case justifications, then a product dashboard, defect trends, KPIs, all of the things necessary for product operations. So I go back now. This was me now bridging a gap between, wait, I was just talking about well health operations not too long ago. Now I'm into product, software, multiple products, multiple platforms, operations. Very, very interesting that everywhere I looked, there was operations everywhere. Marketing operations, technology operations, product operations, finance operations, customer service operations, software engineering operations, quality assurance operations, everywhere. And if you're in a company that does R&D, there's operations for that, the oversight of the activity necessary to create an outcome. And the opportunity that has led me to pushing forward with the Einstein Bridge came as a result of a study I came across, and it blew my mind. In a study by the Project Management Institute, the formalizing body that issues the PMP certification, Project Management Professional, a study was done on the misalignment between business strategy and project management. And the analysis shows that 10% of every dollar that an organization spends is wasted. It goes to no value add for the customer or value add for the organization. Globally, that translates into $1 million every 20 seconds or $2.2 trillion annually. And the incredible thing about this is that executives believe, 85% of them, that the organizations are effective, meaning that they believe the status quo is not wasteful because nobody's quantifying the status quo in a meaningful way. PMI, they did a great job of focusing on that, but ultimately the function that's responsible for and required to provide the insights to the executive leadership team as to what's working and what's not from a systems, people, process, technology perspective is operations. But when we think of operations, we don't necessarily think of it as project management and business strategy. nor do we think about operations as how many different departments have operational components. And so what ends up happening is that the status quo cost the business community globally $2.2 trillion a year. And what does that really mean? Well, just think about it in terms of time wasted, right? So when you're a CHRO or you're a CFO, CEO, and you're looking at the number of people resources that you need to do a particular job, you're estimating that based on the outputs that you're anticipating from the strategies that you implement and the projects that are launched off of that. And so as a result, there's a tremendous opportunity. Generative AI shows up, and I couldn't believe it. Here was IBM Watson no longer at $250,000 just to get in the door in front of everybody. ChatGPT gave everybody an insight into what had already been implemented in medicine through expert systems. Mycin, through Eliza, a chatbot, 1967. Through IBM Watson, the first commercially released was in healthcare and in financial services, 2012. Here was the opportunity, but it looked a little bit different. I thought it would be the autonomous operations concept, and everybody would jump in and start analyzing operations, and it didn't really go that way. Not at the mass level. At the mass level, it's really about turning this incredible technology into a marketer, a sales engine, and it can be so much more. This is the point where I inform you that I have Asperger's. And what Asperger's does for me is you're looking at these equations behind me, is translate everything in my environment into what you see. It's not presumptive. I'm not projecting anything. I'm going to take you a bit further. The very first thing I did once I got access to ChatGPT was to turn every single year of my career into a expressed algorithm or equation for everything I was responsible for. So as a product manager, I have to look at the competitive landscape, assess strengths and weaknesses, and ultimately determine what profit impact that would have. Then I looked at the existing assets of the company, the resources of the company, and again, that has a material profit impact. Market problems, critical needs, product market fit. At that point, we're at an early stage proof of concept. So this is MVP or prototype. The yes or no would likely have a 50% impact. 50% meaning yes, you go forward, or no, you go back to the drawing board. And if you do, you launch an alpha test. You begin to beta test and get feedback from the market so that you can prioritize requirements, product backlog, and figure out, should you buy, build, or partner? One of the critical decisions we make in product management. Once we've determined that, we create our business plan and we move the product in its life cycle to its early introduction. Now I'll move down the equation and talk about really what happens next. After analyzing over 500 of the Fortune 500's 10Ks, the Form 10K being their annual filing where they have to tell you basically everything about the business, because that's one of the requirements of the SEC, I came to identify that there were basically a set of activities every single business, regardless if they were service, product, solution, didn't matter what they were. They followed a certain set of activities, and here they go. They align people by function, put processes in place to deliver a customer experience, and use technology, and they group themselves into business systems, or what we call functional groups. They use those functional groups to address a total addressable market with a unique value proposition. That becomes the target market once you're able to identify this is the area in the market that really loves what we did. You define an ideal client profile, then you execute a marketing strategy against that to generate brand awareness. You use that marketing strategy and you disperse it across communication channels, and that becomes your outreach strategy. Now you're at the buyer persona level where you use certain tactics depending on what the buyer persona values, how they communicate and engage with information, and you create a sales opportunity pipeline. From that point, you can start, as you begin the activity over and over and over, you're going to be looking at an average close rate. And from there, you now have the opportunity to project the number of evaluators per 30 days. And now you have a projected monthly sales volume. that lifetime value of the customer, because you now know how long your customer will be with you and how long it takes to get them, is derived. You can look at a retention rate versus the number of clients you project to get over a 12-month cycle. And now you can project your average monthly rate of return to your investors or to the people who are financially invested in the company. You look at that versus the number of competitors, how many times or what percentage you win against them, again, in the total addressable market. And now you can accurately project, or as accurately as possible, the total projected market opportunity. Average revenue generated per employee, you set a target for that per million. And now you can accurately, or more accurately, project the market valuation of the company, because it's rooted in all of the previous activity, and you can benchmark it against all of the competing companies within the industry. I said in this particular equation, a $1.4 million per employee, because in the age of advanced technologies, you don't need as many employees, or you don't need them to be as rooted in non-value-added activity in order to generate revenue. When you look at that times the number of employees that you have and the number of business systems, functional groups, the number of processes that you engage in per employee, you then have the total dollar amount for the opportunity for efficiency gains. Now, I'm going to share with you that what was incredible about having that expression for me is that at my heart, I'm an engineer. And it was the first time I was able to take functional execution and turn it into a mathematical equation. And then I started socializing it with my fellow humans. And more often than not, the very first thing that was said to me is, Chris, this is not an equation. What was meant is that this is not a numerical equation. I would typically share it with software engineering leaders, people to that effect. And I was a little bit sad for a second, but I forgot. We had just gotten IBM Watson, generative AI, democratized. So what did I do? I put that same equation into Google Gemini. And the extraordinary thing was Google Gemini understood everything I was projecting. As you can see here, it understood that I was talking about building a customer-centric approach, how to integrate technology, what financial considerations you have to make, the marketing and sales funnel of the company, the competitive landscape, and then efficiency optimization. It read my equation as fluently as I just explained it to you. And I realized something at the time. Hey, there's an opportunity here. That $2.2 trillion in operations, misalignment with business strategy, that's everywhere. So I go to the next problem I'd like to solve. And I built an algorithm for the optimal mechanics of semiconductor production and sustainability, recognizing that the increasingly acrimonious relationship between China and the United States could result in an incredible disruption to the supply chain for semiconductor chips in electronics. And so I wanted to be one of the humans that could help, through the advancements in AI, come up with a long form expression of the big picture around how you identify and ultimately properly conduct semiconductor production in a sustainable way across sectors. ChatGPT 01, one of the more advanced models. I put my equation in there, and sure enough, just like Google Gemini, ChatGPT 01 fully understood what I expressed, which is I'm looking at the big picture of everything that I lay my eyes on, and I can convert it into an algorithmic or equation expression that groups the big picture together in a way that allows for AI to help the human counterparts who are responsible for achieving an objective, whatever that objective is. And in this particular case, it's to optimize semiconductor manufacturing to reduce waste and defects. Again, I'm looking at a $2.2 trillion problem. I'm looking at advanced technologies and saying, hey, we can do that. I can solve some of these major pressing issues. I have to look at it in the trillions, because if you make a dent in the trillions, you're talking about billions, 1%, $1 billion. It's not about the money. It's about the opportunity to go from business operations to semiconductor sustainability to thermoelectric and waste utilization. How many people out there know that currently artificial intelligence, the collective drain on the electric grid, is the equivalent to New Jersey? Now, New Jersey is the state that's selected because they have a lot of casinos. So 24/7 pull on the grid. Let me ask a question. No offense to anybody out there in Jersey. If you had to choose between having access to artificial intelligence or New Jersey, which would you choose? If you even halfway stopped to think about that, that's a problem. What we're saying is that artificial intelligence is so integral to our business environment, our working environment, our lives now, that we don't even think about the fact when I said New Jersey, I was talking about people. We should not have to be in a position to make those choices. Servers that power AI are running incredibly hot. They give off a lot of heat. That's where thermoelectricity comes in, the conversion of heat into electricity. Waste utilization. There's a lot of carbon that comes off of these server farms, these data centers. How are we going to convert that into something usable so we don't destroy the environment with all of our technological advances and consumption of artificial intelligence? Okay. And so I go to Claude. And sure enough, just like Gemini, just like ChatGPT, Claude fully understood and knows how to apply the equation I put together so that we can solve some of the biggest and most pressing problems around waste. The $2.2 trillion problem I'm seeking to solve at the Einstein Bridge with my growing team of contributors. And I really appreciate everybody in the early formative stages who've been walking down this road with me to the point where we can get there. We're here now. What I just demonstrated to you is that we at the Einstein Bridge have discovered a new programming language. Where everybody's at prompt engineering, we're at prompt programming. We have discovered a way to narrow the expertise of an AI model, a large language model specifically, to the point that it understands at a much higher and more accurate rate the information that's necessary for that particular domain. So think small language models, but with a doctorate and PhD level brain. And that's why I'm building a decentralized research unit. Researchers from all over the world will be part of this network and contribute data to these small language models that we connect to operations leaders across industries so we can solve the major problem, which is $2.2 trillion or $1 million every 20 seconds is an extraordinary amount of waste when 85% of executives think everything's okay. 10 cents of every dollar, 10% of the organization's spend is just wasted. What if I drop that to 5? Cut it in half, $1.1 trillion back to the market. Now I'll stop there because I want to bring something very interesting to you. I want you to think of Google Gemini as being fluent in Spanish. ChatGPT is fluent in French. And Claude is fluent in German. What I mean by that is these AI models do not use the same principles for which they generate their responses. They actually speak different languages. Some try to predict the next character. Some try to figure out if it's contextually relevant. They all speak different languages. And so as I close, as I embark on solving this $2.2 trillion problem, I'll put this in context. The intellectual property that we're going to be developing at the Einstein Bridge is the equivalent of walking up to a table of people, one who only speaks German, one who only speaks French, one who only speaks Spanish, speaking English, and they all understand and respond back in English. We're on the precipice of something big at the Einstein Bridge. And that $2.2 trillion in waste due to the misalignment of business strategy and project management is a reflection of the inability for operations to properly predict, process, and prescribe in real time changes that need to happen at every functional group level. This is going to be an extraordinary time. And I want to thank Peach Score especially for giving me the sign that I needed to move forward as we continue to develop what I hope to be one of the most valuable operations research companies on the planet. Have a great Sunday.